After freeing a bleeding lion from barbed wire, Ethan suddenly found himself surrounded by 6 silent lionesses. No growls, no movement, just eyes filled with something ancient and wild. One of them stepped forward and did something no one could have seen coming. But what happened next will shock even the most seasoned viewers. Now, let's go back to the beginning. The heat pressed down like a hand from the sky, thick with the smell of dust, blood, and something primal. Ethan sat frozen, his hands still stained red, part his own blood, part the lion's. Sweat clung to his back, and the earth beneath him felt alive, pulsing with tension. The rustle of the thorn brush hadn't lied. Now, they stood before him, 6 lionesses, their tawny coats rippling like liquid sun under the harsh light, forming a silent ring with him at its center. No snarls, no roars, just stillness and breath. The kind of silence that didn't comfort, it tested. Their eyes were what undid him, unblinking, measuring. Each face a portrait of composed ferocity. One lioness, lean and scarred, stepped forward, head low, paws soft against the cracked soil. She was older, clearly the matriarch. Her presence demanded stillness. Ethan obeyed, not from logic, but instinct. His breath came shallow and quick. His thoughts? Not much more than a chorus of disbelief. They were beautiful, terrible, sacred. A low thrum hummed through the air, a deep, vibrating growl, not aggressive, not warning, but layered, like a sound ancient as the bones beneath the dirt. The lioness paused 3 feet away, her head tilted. She was staring at his hands, the same hands that had trembled cutting the wire, that had bled for her kin. Ethan didn't move, not even to wipe the sweat crawling into his eyes. In that suspended moment, his mind flicked through everything he'd ever learned about lions, fragments from documentaries, scattered facts from guidebooks, whispers from the tour driver about how fast they could kill. None of it helped. These lionesses were not in a textbook. They were not a set of predictable behaviors. They were a force, a council, ancient and unfathomable. And he was a man who had wandered too far from the trail, driven not by bravery, but heartbreak. Another lioness shifted, breaking the circle's symmetry just slightly. She was younger, sleeker, her belly bearing the faint line of recent motherhood. She sniffed the air once, twice, then stepped back. A signal, a decision. He didn't know. Ethan's muscles ached from stillness. His skin felt thin, as if stretched too tight. But he didn't move. The matriarch stared a moment longer. Then she sat, just folded herself down, slow and deliberate, and one by one the others followed. The earth no longer felt solid beneath him. Every breath Ethan drew felt stolen, fragile, like air borrowed from a world he no longer belonged to. The lioness's presence distorted time, each second an eternity, suspended in a charged stillness that dared not be broken. Muscles rippled under sun-scorched fur as the lioness nearest him, ancient and scarred like the bark of some sacred tree, leaned forward, her breath brushing his wrist. Ethan didn't blink. Couldn't. Her eyes, rimmed with cataract haze but sharp beneath, held no malice, only judgment. And something deeper, something unnameable. She lowered her great head, and her tongue, coarse, hot, unmistakably real, ran once across the ragged cut on his hand. The touch jolted through him like a thunderclap muffled by awe. It wasn't affection. It wasn't some Disney fantasy of beastly gratitude. It was recognition, ritual. A gesture older than language, older than man. And when she stepped back, the others moved in a ripple, folding down around him in a fluid perimeter. Sphinx-like bodies settling into the dust, heads upright, eyes outward. Sentinels. Ethan's legs gave out beneath him. He sat heavily, cross-legged in the cradle of predators. A shudder passed through his spine. Not fear anymore, but the aftershock of something sacred, something terrifyingly pure. He had entered their domain not as hunter, not as prey, but as witness. And they, impossibly, had accepted him. The sun arced overhead with deliberate slowness, burning shadows into new directions as the hours dragged. Flies buzzed in the heat. A vulture circled once overhead. A jackal slinked into view, lean and hungry, but froze at the edge of the pride's invisible line. One low growl from a lioness was enough. The scavenger vanished. Ethan didn't speak, didn't move. His heartbeat slowed to match theirs, or perhaps the land's itself. Occasionally, one lioness would shift, reorienting like a soldier adjusting watch. Another yawned, exposing fangs that gleamed like ivory knives in the sun. But never did their guard falter. There was no logic to it. No manual, no precedent. Ethan tried to reason through it. What would the rangers say? What would the scientists conclude? But reason had no place here, only presence, only the dust, the blood, the bond written in silence and breath. When the rescue team broke through the bush, shouting his name, rifles slung at the ready, the lionesses rose, not in alarm, but in unity. As one, they stood. As one, they walked away, silent and unhurried. Ethan said nothing. He didn't have to. The camera on his chest had captured everything, but even without it, he knew. Some stories didn't need proof to be real. They only needed to be lived. The world called him a hero. The headlines crowned him the Lion Whisperer, the man whose soul touched the wild and lived to tell about it. News anchors smiled breathlessly into cameras. Reaction videos filled every corner of the internet. Edits with swelling music, freeze frames of the lioness licking his hand, text overlays that screamed, "You won't believe what happens next." He watched none of it, because what the world saw was the spectacle. What Ethan remembered was the silence. A silence so vast it swallowed sound itself. The hush between heartbeats when time bent, when he'd sat surrounded by muscle, fang, and something older than fear. And now, back among people, among screens and clapping strangers, it was that same silence that haunted him. Not as memory, but as absence. After the rangers brought him in, after the footage confirmed the impossible, after the calls from news producers and wildlife NGOs and late-night hosts began flooding his inbox, Ethan did not fly home. He remained in Zambia, refusing interviews, donations, even a brand deal from a safari company that wanted to turn his story into a package tour. He rented a rusting Jeep and drove day after day, retracing his steps like a man possessed. Not out of hope, but from a gnawing, clawing need to understand. He left offerings, meat, water, his own bloodied shirt, near the clearing. He installed motion-triggered cameras. Night after night, he reviewed the footage. A warthog, a hyena, nothing else. No paw prints, no distant eyes catching the infrared light. No sign of the lionesses, no sign of him. Weeks passed. Tourists and locals alike whispered about the man searching for ghosts. Guides told him to give up. "They moved on," one said. "You were a moment, not a memory." But Ethan couldn't let it go. Not because he needed to be remembered, because he feared he hadn't mattered at all. What if it had just been coincidence? A fluke? What if their mercy had nothing to do with him, no meaning, no mystery, just instinct and chance, wrapped in a trick of timing and human fantasy? He had touched something sacred, and now it was gone. And in its absence, A question echoed louder than any applause ever could. Had he only imagined the connection? Or worse, had it simply never been there at all? The wind moved differently there, heavier, reverent, as if the land itself remembered. Ethan stood at the threshold of the clearing, his boots pressed into the same soil where everything had changed. The Zambezi sun had not softened. It carved harsh shadows across his weathered face, deepening the creases earned from a year of searching, wondering, grieving. His back ached more now. His breath came a little slower, but his eyes, though dulled by age and disappointment, flickered with something sharp as they scanned the horizon. He had returned not as a seeker of proof, nor as a man chasing glory. He had come back as someone unfinished. Then, movement. Still as a stone, Ethan watched the tall grass part. The lioness emerged first. She did not prowl or pace. She simply stepped forward, slow and steady, her gaze fixed. The scar beneath her left eye, the gray pooling around the rim of her pupils. It was her. The sentinel, the one who had tested him with silence and breath and a flick of her tongue across his wound. But her eyes were not alone now. Behind her, the grass split again, and the lion appeared. Larger than before, muscled, golden like the sun through storm clouds. He walked with the deliberate calm of a creature who knew his place in the world. And though the limp was subtle, it was unmistakable. The front paw, once mangled in wire, no longer bled, no longer trembled, but it remembered. So did Ethan. He hadn't realized he was holding his breath until the lion stopped. 10 paces between them. Not enough to run, not enough to retreat. The lion raised his head, studied the man before him, his scent, his shape, the shape of a memory. Then, like the pull of gravity reversing for a moment, the beast lowered his head. Not in weakness, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. A gesture neither wild nor tame, human nor beast, but something ancient that reached back before language. The lioness sat behind him, eyes soft, and from the trees they emerged. 3, 5, 7 lionesses. The pride, watching, present. Ethan didn't cry. He stood taller. The ache in his chest didn't vanish, but it eased, like a hand had been lifted. He hadn't imagined it. He hadn't been a fluke. He had mattered, not in the eyes of the world, but in the eyes of something real. And in that clearing, between the watchers and the watched, Ethan found what he hadn't even known he was searching for. Not closure, but belonging.